I had to check my Nyckelharpa on a flight recently, and I did this differently than others I have seen, so I'd like to share what I did. Of course, I would have preferred to take my Nyckelharpa in the cabin with me, but this was not an option for me at this time. I do not have a soft case, and I was unable to get one within the time frame I needed to fly. So here's how I made my flight case and worked through a couple of design challenges. The case I have is a Pelican Storm IM3220 case. This model was recommended to me by both Lydia Ivins and Vicky Swan. My main problem starting out was that everyone else I could find who has flown with their Nyckelharpa has put their soft case inside of the hard flight case. And since I don't have a soft case, I needed to take the approach more of a fiddle case and create an inner structure of the case that would hold the instrument in place securely. I created some blocks of foam that fit snugly around the instrument's lower bout and also its shoulders. I also wanted these two blocks to be movable within the case so that I could adjust it in the future to transport different sized Nyckelharpa. When I bought my case, I ordered it with foam, and it came filled with these dense black foam mats that are 2 inches thick, big, long 2-inch thick sheets that fill the interior dimensions of the case. I didn't want to waste any of this foam if I messed up cutting it, so I bought some cheap foam at a department store to practice on first, the kind of foam you use to make cushions for furniture or pillows. To cut the foam, I used a sharp kitchen knife and placed a sheet of cardboard underneath the foam. Because I have access to a sharp kitchen knife, I was able to cut it without using any sort of special heat tool. After cutting layers of foam to fit around the bottom and the shoulders of the instrument, I also cut a layer to fit over the top at the same points and protect it from bumps from the top and bottom of the case. My initial design had a lot more foam around the top and sides of the instrument, but I realized I didn't need it because the blocks I had already made were pretty good at holding it in place. I also thought that suspending the neck and the headstock in the air, like fiddle cases commonly do, might actually be more protective in case of an impact to the bottom of the case, so that the bottom of the case wouldn't hit against the back of the tuning pegs. For a longer Nyckelharpa, such as an octave harpa, I would plan to cut or remove those lengthwise pieces and then just shift the shoulder block up a little bit further to account for the longer instrument body. While practicing cutting the blocks with the foam I got from the department store, I discovered that having different densities of foam could be actually very useful. So the foam that came with the case is quite firm, while the foam I got from the store was a little bit more squishy. The firmer foam was excellent for holding the instrument in place in the bottom of the case, but the squishier foam would compress a little bit better to protect the more delicate parts on the top of the instrument from any impacts that came from above. After I had all my blocks cut, I ran into a problem that it all just sat a little bit too high in the case, making the top of the case difficult to close. At that point, my blocks, everything was sitting on top of a full piece of the 2-inch thick foam that came with the case. 1-inch foam would have been exactly what I needed. Well, the 2-inch just made it a little bit too tall. I was trying to think of ways to slice this 2-inch piece of foam in half. While I was thinking, I saw a scrap piece of foam on the floor that was 1 inch deep and 2 inches wide. So then I had my solution. I would just take that bottom mat and slice it into 1-inch slices and then rotate them over to put 1-inch strips all along the bottom of the case. Now that I have all my foam blocks cut, my case consisted of very many small pieces of foam. And if the TSA took everything out of this case to inspect it, it would have been quite difficult to put it back together in the right order to protect the instrument. So my last step was to sew a lot of the smaller pieces into larger units. I used big loose stitches through the foam to avoid pinching and ripping the foam. And I also took a lot of pictures and made a step-by-step guide for the TSA in case they needed to put this back together. This instruction sheet sat inside the case when I packed it. Just before flying, I detuned all the strings by about a step to reduce the tension. For a little extra protection, I squeezed some thin bits of foam in between the rows of the keys. I copied this idea directly from Vicky Swan, so thank you, Vicky. I also packed a bunch of clothes in the empty spaces that were around the instrument inside the case. I wasn't using the clothes as extra impact cushion, I was just taking advantage of extra space inside the case. I put 4 TSA locks around the outside of the case just to ensure that the lid would stay closed and it wouldn't fly open if those latches were to open. When I arrived at my destination, the case was upside down on the luggage carousel, resting on its head, so that made me quite worried. The outside of the case had quite a few scuffs and scrapes, showing that it had not been handled gently. But when I finally opened it, everything was still in place, and my Nyckelharpa showed no signs of damage at all. It survived.